What is your question?
I'd like to know where you formed the Anglican Church.
Ah.
Well, why I formed the Anglican Church. It is rather a continuation of the question that was asked before.
It was going to happen anyway. Everyone wanted it.
You see, as we spoke before, Queen Anne and I were to be married. There are those who said that Queen, what was her name, Catherine, that Queen Catherine and I could not be divorced, for as you know, at the time, most everyone in England was a member of the Roman Catholic Church. And among those people who disagreed with my divorce was, of course, the Pope. Now, he perhaps disagreed most firmly of all. But as I, honestly and truthfully, did not want to, Catherine disagreed somewhat too, I admit, as I did not want to go against what I interpreted by reading the scripture as God's law, and because I wanted to secure the most important thing for England, a king. There had not been a queen on the English throne for 600 years, a thing I could not tolerate, nor permit to go down into posterity as my causal action. So, it was God's will, I believe, that the Anglican Church was formed, so that the Pope would no longer be able to say that I could not be divorced from whomever I sought to be divorced from, in order to secure the continuing good health of England and a king on its throne.
But there were those who wanted to have a different church. They felt that the other church was taking too much of their monies and that they wanted their own say about things. And it was very important for the people at the time. It was only a matter that it just made it possible. It made it possible for the people to get what they needed in their lives.
It was convenient, I admit.
I would like to ask a question related to this girl's question. How did you accomplish this among your population?
Well, dear, you are asking the questions, aren't you? Two things, principally. It was required of all clerics, of all clergymen, of all bishops, of all priests, to sign the oath of allegiance, which said that I, Henry VIII, King of England, to bear that name, was the single and only supreme head of the Church of England. No pope, but the king was the head of Christ's church on earth. So, once all of the bishops and clerics and priests had all signed such an oath of allegiance, they automatically became a clergyman in the Anglican Church, or the Church of England. That was the first thing. The second thing was to destroy the abbeys.
How did you get the priest to sign?
It was a simple enough thing to do. You put the piece of paper down, you get an ink pot, and you give them a feather quill. And you put right next to them a very big man with a very big sword, and you say to them, which shall it be, the quill or the sword? It was astonishing, the numbers of those who chose the quill, but many chose the sword.
Oh, Sir Thomas More chose the sword.
A good man, Thomas.
Yes, he was.
Loss.
He was such a good man. He was a loss to us, I'm afraid.
I see. Thank you very much for answering this question, and thank you for calling. We appreciate you your calling in and giving your question. Okay, I think we have another live call now, too, as well.
Good.
Hello?
Hello,
What's your name?
Lisa.
Okay, Lisa, what is your question?
I'd like to know how the children were cared for in that time.
Okay, let's ask Her Majesty Queen Anne this question.
Yes, the children. Well, now, the children of the royalty are different than the children of the peasants, of course. As Henry did say before, we mentioned that those children who were of the peasants and the rising middle class, of course, we should mention there are those who are making enough money to actually have a different class. We have the royalty, we have the peasants, and now we have people who are making their own monies. And so those children were learning trades. The children who are, such as royalty or nobility, were tutored, or they were sent to school. For instance, I was sent off to France to learn the proper manners of the court, to learn languages, how to hold a fork and a knife and a spoon, and all those things, how to dress properly. And women were educated, as I did say before. Now, cared for, that is an interesting question, because you could talk about physically cared for, whether they got the proper treatment if they were ill. There are difficulties nowadays with fairies stealing children. You know, we of course believe in fairies and elves and sprites and all of those things. And if a child were thought to be not your real child, if a fairy has stolen yours and has put in its place a block of wood, and what they do is they put something on it that's called glamour, fairy glamour, And it's to make this block of wood look like your real child. Well, it won't eat right, and it cries all the time, or maybe it doesn't make a sound at all. What do? Well, you take it to a fairy knoll, and you sit it there at the very stroke of midnight when the moon is full. And they have to take it back and give you your child back. Or there might be another way of doing it. If you throw the block of wood out the door, and if it doesn't come running back in, well, it wasn't your child anyway.
I see.
Now, caring for children, it's very hard because every child gets sick. And of course, children are very hard to give them the correct food because they won't eat what they're told to eat. And peasant children are not brought up in the same way that we are. They have other duties to perform.
They work mostly, and
Yes,
that's all.
they work in the fields.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Does that answer it? Thank you very
I hope
much.
it does.
Okay. Now, I would very much, I've been looking at your instruments, and I would just love to have the students hear this harp that you have. Would you mind playing something for us?
Oh, not at all.
Thank you.
Not at all. I will play a piece of music that is a riddle. It's an old Celtic riddle. It may be one of the oldest songs ever written in the Celtic language. What might be a good idea is if we sang the song, and then I will play it for you on the harp, and you could tell what the words to the song are.
And while we shall sing it, listen closely to the words. And then when she plays it, you think what the riddle is. And we will see if you can guess what the answer is.
Yes, see if you can guess it.
Okay.
And she shall bring the birds in the spring and dance among the flowers. In summer's heat her kisses sweet she sings in leafy bowers. She cuts the grain and harvests the corn when fruits of fall surround her. Her days grow old in winter's cold. She draws her cloak around her.
What is it?
I don't know. Tell me.
She shall bring the birds in the spring and dance among the flowers. In summer's heat, her kiss is sweet, she sings in leafy bowers. Mother Nature.
Oh, of course.
She cuts the grain and harvests the corn when fruits of fall surround her. Her days grow old and winter's cold, she draws her cloak around her. Isn't that lovely?
Lovely.
Well, then I shall play it for you on the harp.
Thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. You know, the harp is an instrument that has been very popular for many, many years. It's the most supreme instrument that you can play at any court and always be welcome. It's the most popular of all the instruments, I think.
What other instruments do you play?
We have a great many of them.
All right.
I also brought with us something else that's of interest. It is another stringed instrument, besides the recorders, which I showed you. And that does have a sound of a flute. But while I am here, I shall show you this. This is called, what do you think this is called?
Well, I don't know.
Very interesting instrument. It's very strange shape. Not often is it seen. This is the same instrument that David, the king in the Bible, played.
I see.
This is called the psaltery, and it's spelled much like Psalms, P-S-A-L. Psalms and psaltery, they are spelled with a P-S. When David played it, he plucked the strings like this. But during our time, we have found it to be of very much interest that we add the bow to it. And so now it is a bowed psaltery, and it's held like this in the lap and is bowed thusly.
Lovely.
Very haunting sound, isn't it?
Very pretty.
Very interesting song. We also have rebecks, which are much like your violin today. That's a bowed piece, and it's about this size, a very small little violin-looking thing. And we have mandolins, and we have lutes and things like that. They're very interesting instruments. They're all very different, and when played together, they are quite interesting. Henry's favorite pieces look very much like the recorder here, but he calls them his little buzzies. And they are crumb horns, and they sound like ducks. I think they're quite horrid at times, but if you do sit under a tree and play one of the little buzzies or the crumb horns, you'll notice that ducks will come to visit. It's true, they do. They like